Hi everyone, it's me again, and I think I fixed the audio problem by adjusting the gain, pressing the button on my audio interface that I was supposed to press last time, and I got this little pop filter. So please let me know. Please let me know if it's better. Thank you. Now, today's video is going to be a little bit more conversational and quick, and that's me saying that I don't have time to edit this properly because it is already 8:40 at night. And I have to work tomorrow at my silly little corporate job. So today we're going to bring the haterade back out. I genuinely need to make a playlist called like haterade videos, which are like these like somewhat impulsive, chattier videos where I'm just really annoyed about somebody, a la Peter Mon style perhaps. We're going to talk about Raw Beauty Kristi, who used to be this just kind of makeup creator that stuck to herself. Mostly she had some kind of honest, more, personal videos as per, a lot of beauty creators at the time. I'll bring up one of them later actually, because of new proof showing that she's a homesteader, anti-LGBTQIA plus homeschooler. And I got a lot to say about it. But first, links, source, ways to support the channel all down below, including Amazon, Patreon, YouTube memberships, all that kind of stuff. Thank you to all the people who support the channel. Names on the screen. Thank you. 3 parts of the video. We're going to do part 1, the information that came out. Part 2, homeschooling's roots and prejudice, because yes, I'm saying that and I'm going for it. Part 3, other creators' opinions, because some of the girlies came out too before me, because I worked. Because I had the unfortunate reality of having a job. So let's get into it. Part 1, the information that came out. Before we really get into like the brand new information, we need to get into the history of like who Raw Beauty Kristi kind of just is in general. Raw Beauty Kristi is, or was, I guess rather, primarily a makeup guru kind of content creator who documented a lot of her life online. And kind of did a lot of SFX makeup and kind of really creative looks, and then moved into more kind of glam a la Jaclyn Hill style content, who grew to fame because of a video of her putting a microscope on the crusted, dusted, busted Jaclyn Hill lipsticks. I think I talk about that in my Rhetoric of Jaclyn Hill video. I'll tag it down below just for the tea and goss, in case I did, because I don't feel like checking right now. She also documented other things, such as like actually kind of briefly before Faith, talking about how her husband didn't go to church. Well, we'll see how that changed anyway. And also history of infertility specifically, which is something that we will be focusing on in this video. Not in like a bad way, if that makes sense. Anyway, in 2020, despite being told that she would never get pregnant with like years of trying, I think it was like 10 years or something, she actually did get pregnant with her first child that was born either later in that year or early 2021, something like that. Kristi has since publicly spoken about the kind of the trauma that came from the birth, as well as having like really severe postpartum anxiety and postpartum depression. And she talks about like the ways that she was trying to cope with this like dramatic and traumatic birth. Traumatic birth is what I mean specifically. And this is where a lot of cracks started to form, and not in the way that people were mad that she was having an internet mental health crisis. That's not really what's happening. And this is an unfortunate reality, and this is coming from somebody who's had a doctor tell them they have a pretty severe anxiety disorder that borders like a panic disorder and obsessive compulsive disorder, okay? So the call's coming from inside the house, okay? But like when you have really severe mental health struggles, it will also often reveal the fundamental flaws in a person. So for me, it could be along the lines of even general disregard, might be like my crux. For Kristi, it was showing a lot of these like theories and unfounded thought processes that she began to lean into. Because I remember specifically, and I know this is going to be anecdotal because I can't find the stuff because it was just Instagram stories that I briefly witnessed, a long time ago. But there was like stuff about her like strongly resisting medications like SSRIs. Specifically, interestingly enough, the same SSRI that I spent like a year on, which is Lexapro. Now, for me personally, I've talked about this on streams and stuff, that I stopped taking Lexapro. It wasn't because I felt like the medication was bad. I don't like being on medication, and it was because I was actually having like severe side effects that required for me to be off of it because it was like killing me kind of, which is just not something that happens to a lot of people. It's actually quite rare. I have some sort of issue, which I'm seeing doctors about, please don't get mad at me, in regards to like hormonal issues that cause medications to work funny. Anyway, with that in mind, Kristi has kind of talked about getting on and off of it and all this stuff, and how it like took her to genuinely like a genuine full-blown crisis to even consider it because of a distrust for these things. But she would always kind of line it with like, oh well, like I mean, you can do whatever you want, which is a very fundamental process in the closeted conservative pipeline thought process, where they'll present these harmful ideologies or these pseudoscience-based ideologies and then just say, but I'm just doing them and they don't affect other people, which then leans into things like anti-vax, where they try to say stuff like, oh, for my kid, it's just my kid who's not getting vaccinated, not considering the fact that herd immunity has to exist and all of these other things, right? With this, she also kind of discussed often like seeking like alternative treatments and alternative health, which again is getting into that crunchy mom, art, right? Things like that. She also moved out of the city, I think Seattle, and then moved into this like house in the woods, has been like homesteading ever since. A little known fact about me, and I can't show pictures unfortunately because it will dox me big time. I actually probably could because it's such a remote area that I don't think anybody, unless you get like that guy on GeoGuessr. Actually, I don't even think you could GeoGuess that area because I don't think you, on like a Google Maps, it doesn't go low enough that you can actually see anything. I lived in an area as densely forested as, and actually I would argue probably way more remote and way more isolated as far as like low population numbers than where Kristi came from. So I've seen many of these folk in my lifetime. I know somebody whose mom said, I didn't vaccinate my son because it would with his chi. University educated white woman, by the way, because that's actually usually who it is. Quick side tangent, actually. My bestie in grad school and I did a project together, and I think I can actually still pull up the paper, even though if that class had the world's biggest hater, it was me. We talked about this school that had... Yes, it's right here. It is called... There is a paper that I will... If I can't tag it down below because it's locked, I'll do like the citation for it. It's called Social Cultivation of Vaccine Refusal and Delay Amongst Waldorf (Steiner) School Parents, which is talking about this rich white people, university educated rich white people school system that doesn't have the vaccine requirement, essentially, like to hyper simplify it, and the ways that the parents lean into pseudoscience and things like that. This is like a quote that says, Western culture today emphasizes active, informed healthcare consumerism in which parents and patients are responsible for educating themselves so that they make wise health choices. This burden of responsible consumption infuses Western parents' experience with pediatric vaccination. That said, why are some parents more concerned about vaccines than vaccine-preventable diseases? What is to be done to counter these misplaced worries that spur dangerous choices? And then it skips down further and it says, moreover, rather than assuring conformity to scientific agreement on positions, high scientific literacy may in fact correlate with the contrary, as it does in regard to climate change, particularly for individuals with vested interests. High scientific literacy may also intensify vaccine rejectionism. This is what I mean. This is why I'm talking about this video, actually, because also it's alleged via the Reddit thread that I'll tag down below that Kristi has been deleting comments about vaccines. When people say that Robbie DeChristie has fallen down the crunchy mom pipeline, this is the pipeline that I'm talking about. The vaccine's gonna with my son's chi shit. Let's be real. So, let me continue to my actual script, because that was off script. That's how quickly I remember these things, because of how much I'm weirdly involved in these conversations. I do hella makeup. I have a master's degree in teaching, specifically, and I lived in butt-ass nowhere. And lived around people from butt-ass nowhere. Of many, the area I lived in was pretty low income and poor education. But like surrounding areas were not like that, let's say, right? So Audra Raines discusses the mental health crisis in more detail in her stream. I'm going to tag her stream and Peter Mon's videos down below. Peter Mon references Audra too. Peter Mon loves Audra. Love that for Audra. Actually, big time slay. Why can't Peter Mon love me? Anyways, let's move on. Once Robbie DeChristie's son, who's, if you want to know how locked in I am on Robbie DeChristie, I know what that kid's name is. She only revealed his name for like a week. Okay, I don't know, like, obviously, like, the sleuths and stuff found the Facebook posts and things that we'll get into. I just knew his name from when she announced it really briefly and then took it back. I remember. So once the child started growing up and Robbie, Kristi, and husband Zach moved into the woods and all that stuff, she began discussing kind of publicly online the way that she wanted to raise the child, and also kind of really ramped up the Zach and Kristi channel to be a sort of like homestead channel. Then there were videos and stories on Instagram that talks about things like trying to keep the son's diet really natural and prevent like cross-contaminations, and it starts getting a little sus. Being concerned for the well-being. I'm literally trying not to say Wellbutrin. Good God, I was talking about Lexapro and I've rotted my own brain. Being concerned about the well-being of your child is not a bad thing. I have a master's of education. Please, I hope that more people are like that. However, being misinformed in that the drive to care for them can be innately harmful, or not innately, inherently harmful. So, such as vaccinations, right? Like not vaccinating your kid, right? Being concerned for the well-being of the vaccine over the vaccine-preventable diseases is something that is a direct result of those two things, right? Recently, like last week, it is currently July 11th, there were pictures of her son at a 4th of July parade that was posted on Facebook that says, God's children are spoken for. Now, there's a book in that shelf there called Jesus and John Wayne, which I've read in a lot of my like fundy videos, and I've talked about fundamentalist kind of thought processes on these things a lot. I've had long rants on these videos as well of the use of children to lead the message of conservative interests and values. This is because it's the idea of the unshaped, unmolded mind and the corruption of liberal values. This is something that they've used as an opposition for a really long time. This is also how they try to keep up the concept of the traditional home, of the need of the mother to be at home and raise the kid, which is cool and everything, but y'all screwed the booty of the economy so bad that that's not even possible. So please explain to me how you want to do that. And when I say conservative, I also mean like the liberal, like the middle, like I'm just saying like the people in power have screwed this so much that you can't have the one income household thing, really. The luxury of being able to be concerned for your child while hyper isolating them is something that is now become genuinely like a 1% thing, which is so, well, not 1%, but like 8% or something, which is like genuinely crazy to think about. But anyway, we're gonna ignore that for now because I'm gonna get into a whole thing about trickle-down economics and Reaganism, and then we're gonna lose the plot of the movie here. So with the sign, this, and I'm gonna put the picture on screen because there's one that's censored because again, we're not involving the kid, okay? We're not involving the baby. Now I understand a lot of people are not even showing the picture. I think because it's censored, I think we need to see what we're looking at here because, like, I understand not showing it, but I also think it's talked about so little in, like, YouTube space that I want you to see. Now, people on Reddit have shown Kristi's actual Facebook, profile liking this post. Okay, so this is co-signed. So even if in some world this isn't her kid, even though the people that have seen it uncensored say that kid looks exactly like Kristi, she's still co-signing the message here. So that's kind of at the end of the day. And also it's obvious once we get to the homeschooling stuff that it matters, okay? This, along with the homesteading and the fact that the child's poster said God's children are spoken for, really brings this to a crux. And then the thing that kind of seems to push everyone over the edge is this really unfortunate thing. This is what's alleged in the Reddit. I guess everything is alleged in Minecraft and game or whatever. And for the people that think that I genuinely think I'm skirting a lawsuit because I say in Minecraft, can you get a grip? I just think if I'm gonna get sued, I want the transcript to say in Minecraft and in game because that would be funny. Anyway, unfortunately, there was a tragedy within Kristi's family regarding her sister. I think I remember Kristi talking about this in a video when I was still actively watching her, which was before the James Charles stuff that happened with Peter Mon last summer. Oh boy. There's videos on that if you want to get into that on your own. I'll skim it a little bit later, but Kristi's sister lost her child. Her child had been sick throughout like most of their life, it seems. And based on what I've gathered from the Reddit, and this is alleged in game, Kristi's sister really fell into like Christianity big time, which happens to a lot of people in tragedy. And this is why a lot of the like Christian, for lack of a better term, like the Christo-fascist, like Christian industrial system situation is really predatory. If you notice, for example, like the way that, and this is a very dodgy opinion, maybe like very like controversial, but like, for example, like I find like the concept of AA to be a little bit predatory because it leans you into faith when it links to like sobriety, and I don't necessarily think those should be contingent of each other, because if you end up, let's say, deconstructing from your faith, then there's limited resources that's holding your sobriety per se. Now, I'm not saying I'm an expert on AA or how any of that works. I just find tying the two together can be a little bit risky. But things like that, the Christian church really leans into things like, orphans and schooling in this concept and preserving children and doing all these kind of like sanctity-based things can cause a lot of stuff to happen, okay? Now, with Kristi's sister being big into our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, Kristi recently announced that she will be homeschooling the baby. Let's go. Oh, fuck, God. Via a homeschooling co-op. Now, I'm going to say this right now. If your kid's not disabled, your kid's not a professional athlete or an actor, or they weren't in like a severe mental health crisis, or there's not some sort of like causation, it's just because you think like the public school system's poison or some stuff like, or some bull like that. I am a homeschool hater. If there is one homeschool hater left, it is me. If there are no homeschool haters, it's because I have endgamed. I hate homeschooling. I'm saying this now. I worked in the public school system. I went to public school. A lot of my friends and colleagues and whatever worked in the private system. I've seen the private system in detail. I know what happens. Okay? I don't even like the private system. You think I'm going to like homeschooling? And Americans, don't get your knickers in a twist about private schools and charter schools. I taught your kids too, okay? I spent 3 years teaching high school to college age range students from 7 different countries, including the United States of America. Within the United States of America, I didn't go to America, I did this remote or whatever. In the United States, I've taught from 8th grade to 2nd year university. So I've seen a pretty good range, okay? I've taught kids at community college. I've taught kids in high school. I've taught people in college. I've taught people at, I've actually taught someone through to the beginning of a master's degree, actually. I have an idea. I've also done like teaching on state literacy tests. I've done teaching on SATs. I've done the whole nine, college applications, everything. Now, homeschooling in the United States tends to serve a pretty unique purpose. There are a lot of ties between preservation of Christian faith and fundamentalism and the rejection of modern social construction that goes into the roots of the homeschooling system. And this is what's happening with Kristi. Sleuths figured out which of the homeschooling co-ops it was. I'm not going to say what it is because I don't want the Doxy Doc strike on this here channel. I'm going to read the mission of this place, however, because I was genuinely gagged. So the page says, blah, 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 place, a homeschooling cooperative. I'm not even going to put it on screen because that's going to make it like too obvious. I was going to before, but now I'm like, yeah, that scares me. If you want to go look through the Reddit thread and you figure it out, that's not my circus, not my monkeys, okay? Blah, 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 homeschool cooperative that is an affordable solution for parents who desire a well-rounded Christian school education for their kids. We offer a thorough education that invites our Heavenly Father's heart into every part of the school day. Our goal is all of our teachers and our students is to feel an intimate closeness to the Father's heart as we worship, learn, and play together as a community. Now, there's also the About page. The blah, 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 blah place as a lighthouse for this fallen world. This is hyperbolic language. This is manipulative. The Rhetoric lady is here. Back. Guess who's back again or whatever. Saying that the world has fallen in relation to the education system. I can go on, I've literally gone on 2-hour-long rants about this. When I have a whole video on this, actually, and I'll tag it down below. When we're talking about things like literacy and stuff, People don't understand the way that the parameters of literacy has changed, the parameters of assessment has changed, and the structures of retention and learning are different. The way that they decided what literate meant in 1970 is vastly less complex and different than it means now. This is not me saying that the current student body isn't struggling, but all of these millennials going hee hee ha ha, Gen X kid or Gen Alpha kids stupid, are very ill-informed. That's all I'm going to say about that before I make new enemies by accident. But correlating the current education system to a fallen world is a manipulative hyperbolic tack, a place of rescue from the darkness and perseverance of a broken public school system. Now, I want you to notice that they never actually dictate what value that is. The reason why they're doing this is that it is fear-mongering is most effective when you leave the mind open to guess what those gaps are. People's imagination spans far wider than reality tends to span to. The mission is to provide a safe place for children to learn and grow in their relationship with God, building up a community of homeschoolers who are taking back their identities in Christ Jesus, which is strange because I feel like that's... Anyway, we pray to be a seed-planting cooperation for the kingdom of heaven. I also just live for the fact that I think the sentence structure of this isn't very good. And it's the schooling. We are also here to inform and equip other churches and or communities how to plant a school. There's grammar errors in it. We are also here to inform and equip other churches and or communities how to plant a school in your area. The Lord told us we would be a blueprint for more schools to come. We have faith and we are walking boldly with the world of our Father in our hearts. Now, I also know that I'm going to get comments about people being like, oh my God, you're so mean to people who are Christian, blah, 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 all that stuff. I'm not laughing at people who happen to be Christian. I'm laughing at the manipulative, profiting, borderline Christian, probably Christian fascists, because when they mean broken, they mean a school system that lets you talk about gay people. That's what it usually means. Let's be realistic here. People are going to do the craziest mental gymnastics to get around this. Think about the legislation passed in Florida. Think about how in Ohio they want to make it mandatory to teach the Bible. Think about the banned books in the United States school system. And then try to come back at me with this. Because I feel like if I get enough comments, I'm just going to release on Twitter a Google Doc of a research paper that I'm going to write. If you're really going to try to go toe-to-toe with me on this one. Listen. There is a blatant disrespect for teachers as teaching as a profession that is genuinely shocking and disheartening. Teaching is the most important thing that profession that exists, essentially. Besides farming. And before you go, Mika, what about medicine? Do you want a doctor who never went to school? Quick. Answer quick. Do you want an engineer that can't read? Okay, let me rephrase that. That can't read at all. That's a joke. That's a joke because I went to school with engineers. Anyway, do you want what other professions that people think are... Do you want a lawyer? Do you want a lawyer that can't read a book? No, you don't. Right? You don't want an engineer that doesn't know basic arithmetic. Right? Yes. Teachers are vital to everything. People don't realize that the only way that they know how to integrate themselves into society, how to interact with other people, concepts as simple as sharing, concepts as simple as basic empathy, concepts as complex as the way that they view media and the way that they have critical risk assessment, boils down to the education system and the teachers that follow them. Don't get me wrong. You can have dog teachers. I've had 3 get fired because I made them get fired, okay? I had a teacher call me fat by typing on the smartboard, okay? I know that there are bad teachers. Trust me, I fought with plenty of them in my internships. But the worst teacher still goes into this with 10 times the knowledge that Kristi does. Let's keep it a stack, bitch. Let's be real. And I'm so annoyed that the lack of respect, because I'm not even teaching right now. I didn't want to do it. because of things like that lack of respect and the lack of freedom that you have in the profession because of that. You can't have a social media presence because your ability to be respected is already so fragile. Think about that, right? You can't even do something that's considered kind of like a basic right to communication. And this is not me saying that it's impossible. It's really tricky though. Here's the section that says who we are not. We aren't a school. Instead, we are a homeschool collective of families contributing time towards our children's education. We don't provide letter grades. Instead, we evaluate progress through unit assessments within our curriculum books. Just so you know, people who only exist in America, there are competency-based curriculums that exist in this world. Now, a lot of them are still tied to letter grades. For example, Quebec's is a competency-based curriculum with things called such as broad areas of learning that specifically focus on things like community knowledge, ecology knowledge, or like how to be like responsible in this earth, understanding like health and your role in the world, the way that you would have your role in your job, which these are fundamental things that people, I feel like in these homeschool collectives are not going to think about because they're not educated to apply these things through their teaching. We don't provide, instead we evaluate progress through unit assessments within our curriculum books. That's the same thing. What they're doing again is they're being blatantly manipulative in the way that they repackage these statements. And in that, they're trying to bring fear in the attachment of the current school system. America's school system's not very good. Like worldwide too, it ranks okay, you know what I mean? And there are some states where it ranks really bad. But again, respectfully, I would bet that 10 times over Kristi's high school education being able to teach. I don't know how that's going to go over. I don't know why my most base take on earth is that if you have a high school diploma, it should be illegal that you teach a child. In Germany, for example, homeschool is illegal. You should have surpassed the level of education that you're teaching to. I feel like that should be common sense. And because people like to tie this concept of classism into any realm, any aspect of education, it seems like nowadays, education teaching is education. That's the whole point. You cannot tell me that you don't need school to teach because you're doing school. That's you know how like in the Barbie movie, Ken's job is beach? Your job is school. Your job is read. You know what I mean? Like, and that's like, I'm hedging so much because I'm just so I would go in way harder if it wasn't a video on the internet. Y'all should hear me rant and rave in my real life. Maybe we'll do like a Patreon exclusive Mika rant about the education system. Let me know if you want that actually. Like members and patrons, I'll do an audio rant where I just bicker about the school system for like 20 minutes. Anyway, with like my like professional knowledge or whatever. We aren't standard centered. Instead, we're student centered. If you have curriculum and you have books, those books have standards inherently. So that doesn't even make sense. We don't hand out report cards. Instead, we keep a portfolio of progression for each student and meet with parents regularly to review it. That's a report card, gang. Have you never heard of what's a parent-teacher interview? Quick. I have somewhere. Hold on. I think I actually, hold on. Oh, it's not in here. I have somewhere the code scheme for the progress reports I wrote for my students, which are not graded. It is a general progress report on how I think they perform academically and how I think they perform socially and behaviorally in the classroom, which is given to the parents very early in the term. Now, obviously, I'm comparing Quebec's school system to whatever it works in the US. It's because that's what my degree's in. However, this is something I've also seen in other school systems in other provinces. If not, you get pretty consistent updates via things like Google Classroom. If you have things like, there's like portals and stuff, they're all different names. I think I remember one of them was called like Mosaic or something like that. I'm just trying to show you with my combined rhetoric knowledge and education knowledge that this is positioned hyper dishonestly from the jump. Man, I'm pissed. Holy shit. Next meme. Now, if you've gone this far and don't believe that I'm being reasonable with how grumpy I am and how many side tangents I've gone on, the homeschool co-op connects child suicide to the public school system. I'm gonna I'm not going to put the video in because I'm worried about like copyright. I'm going to put a couple screenshots from it though, because the video is just text on a black screen, on like a kind of black screen. So just, as I'm ranting right now, you're seeing them on the screen. You're getting an idea of what I'm going for. The same sort of idea of letting the brain fill in the gaps. I think if the whole basis of your school system is to be fear-mongering, manipulative, odds are the kids aren't at the center of it. Crazy! Base take again from Mika, clearly. Oh my god. So people began looking into also Kristi's husband, Zach. Zach got some strays, for real. And notice some of the pages he's following. Some people in the Reddit thread noted that he had a different username in the past on Instagram. And I'm talking like last year or so. And they figured out it's because there were allegedly whispers in the community before of weird pages that he was following. And people didn't want... It is alleged and hypothesized that people didn't want him to didn't want to be noticed. Right? I'll put the screenshots of some posts from an account that my bestie Elle and I, who I've done the podcast episodes with, have confirmed that he follows. Now, as soon as you see a Wojak that's not hyper ironic, we are already in hell. Okay? Let alone the brainwashing thing, because wait for the brainwashing thing to say it's because of soy. It's the general paranoia, fear-mongering, brainwash rhetoric that the alt-right uses to be bigots with extremely hateful and derogatory views, and the pipeline is always the same and is just reskinned eugenics and anti-Semitism. I have pitched this as a PhD. This is how deep I've gone into this. But nobody cares about little me, so I'm not getting the PhD, I guess. These people make careers off of twisting fear and distrust in established systems into counterintuitive people that make useless hate to spread in order for them to vote against their own self-interests. At the end of the day, we're lining the pocket of some rich guy that wants tax breaks for his oil business. Because that's really where it goes. You think Trump's going to save you, girl? Good, we're not even getting to Biden. Oh my god, I just watched that thing where he called Kamala Vice President Trump. We're going to ignore that for now. So, this is the basis of what we know thus far. Now, let's just rant a little bit about homeschooling a bit more. So, part 2, homeschooling's roots and prejudice. I feel like I need to do a million disclaimers with proof that I know what I'm talking about. Well, I've already talked about my degree and my experience before, so this cuts out a lot of this part, actually. I also did, in my master's degree, about a school year's worth of internships as well, in the school system directly, not like with students privately like I was doing before, to also obtain a teacher certificate. From doing all of that, I firmly believe that someone who possesses a high school diploma, which Kristi does, and don't argue with me, I confirmed it in a video called Raw Advice Number 3, Sex, Religion, and Long-Distance Relationships, which is a really interesting watch in context. I'll link it down below, which is released March 18th, 2015, where she says, I've had no interest in going to college. This person should not be teaching. Point blank, period.
All That Wisconsin 14 says, do you have a college degree? No, I do not have a college degree. I had no interest in going to college. If I had, I know I would just be in a buttload of debt, and I would be a half chef, half nurse, half dental hygienist, half, this, half that. I honestly, I've changed my mind so many times on what I want to do. I finally figured out that what I want to do in life is work on social media and be a makeup artist. And that probably doesn't take much school. Don't need schooling to do that stuff. If you want to work at certain places, you do. But no, I have zero interest in going to college. And, some people, it's really, really important to them. It's just never been important to me.
The fact that this is even a debate is ridiculous. And if you're debating with me, argue with the wall, I'm probably going to block you. I'm so serious. Again, do you want a doctor that only went to high school? Give me a break. Because so much of teachers' college and so much of a bachelor's of education or a master's of education is base praxis. And also learning, if the gaps present themselves, how to fill them in the appropriate amount of time that your child isn't screwed for life. See it this way. Based on everything together, teachers are not even able to teach all subjects. Meanwhile, somehow, somebody who just went to high school is supposed to be able to teach a kid how to recognize numbers and count. This is if it's good, by the way, because they're probably just going to teach him how to pray and hate gay people. Let's keep it a stack again. Especially with the God's children stuff, Teachers are not trained in every subject, and they're professionals. Now, I've been asked when I was doing contract interviews for teaching, which I did a couple of them, if I could teach math. That's because in college, I did applied science, and I've done math up to Calculus 3. I did Cal 1, Cal 2, Cal 3 linear algebra in college, okay? And I did formal logic in university as well. This makes me have 2 years post-secondary above high school to teach math. And that would only be if they really, really, really needed somebody for like 1 or 2 classes. It wasn't even like going to be like a full math contract. So how is this group of parents gonna ragtag team teach these kids? Because I can only speak really accurately about literacy and about like English education, like literature education. This expands to other languages as well. Obviously, like I know, like if you can read in French, you speak French, kind of deal. Reading is not a natural process. Okay, reading does not come naturally. Again, the video tag down below, I talk about this. I'm gonna read you a really brief part from an article that I had, which discusses what's called developing a powerful core curriculum. This is at the basis of the education system, and I think this article is actually American. No, I lied. This one's from Canada, but still, a lot of them were American. That's why I thought it might have been. Anyway, the fundamental purpose of a school is to guarantee that every student learns that he or she needs to become a successful, contributing adult in a rapidly changing world. Those needs shape the essential core curriculum for any effective education system. Accordingly, the core curriculum educators teach in Tier 1 must include Kristi, what's Tier 1? Answer quick. What does that mean? You should know what that means if you're a teacher. Now that we've paused, Tier 1 means your standard level that does not need extra intervention outside of the classroom to fill in gaps for specific skills such as literacy, arithmetic. In secondary school, the core, because I taught my degrees in secondary school teaching, the core curriculum covers a wide variety of subjects, skills, and concepts. In past practices, the challenging curriculum might have been reserved for the highest achieving students, and a less interesting or rigorous curriculum would have been put in place for struggling learners. Today's education standards specify that every student must be able to demonstrate mastery over the core curriculum. With a variety of support, scaffolds, and differentiated test practices, most students should be able to make adequate progress at Tier 1. In the era of standards-based instruction, teachers' design curriculum isn't always a norm. Instead, many educators are tasked with teaching commercial, evidence-based instructional programs for reading, writing, spelling, and mathematics. See how the word evidence-based is in there, by the way? Let's continue. Often teachers also have to follow a district pacing guide that leaves them with little flexibility regarding instructional design. This is particularly true with advanced placements in honors classes. With an ever-increasing emphasis on English language arts and mathematics core standards, the pressure to spend more time helping students and master these subjects often overrides the content area subjects such as social studies and science. In spite of these current realities, educators have a fundamental responsibility to design and present a powerful core curriculum. A powerful core curriculum includes 5 key components. And then the components are essential standards, success criteria for mastery, 21st century skills, meaningful, relevant, and student-centered instruction. The same thing that this other place is claiming that the public school system doesn't have. And evidence-based practices. Now, listen, again, this sounds like I'm literally glazing the public school system. I think there are so many problems. But what I'm saying is, I don't think homeschooling in the context that Kristi's trying to apply it in are actually doing anything. Even just on a rhetorical standpoint, if we ignore the other degree, if we cycle back to the first degree that I have, listen to the difference in language. That this isn't designed to drive fear in the reader, to drive fear into the instructor, rather to motivate them into the concept of the complex and daunting task, but necessary one, to bring a quality education to students. Now, if we cycle back to Kristi, I'm going to put on screen some notes that I made for one of my classes, which just shows the basis of instruction at its roots. And look at how much stuff is going on here. You can pause to read them if you're really curious about what I had going on. For example, if we're talking about literacy gaps don't grow year by year. For example, let's say Kristi teaches this kid up to an 8th grade reading level. But then because she isn't educated on how to advance that further, doesn't recognize that he's stuck there. By 9th grade, he's a year behind. By 10th grade, you think he'd be 2 years behind. But it's actually sort of like an exponential growth. For example, if you don't, one of the common figures that they had for us, and it's in this 300-page RTI document, which I tag in the description of the video I made about teaching. There is, I couldn't find the figure because again, it is 9:30 p.m. now. I think it's like if you're at the if you're at a fourth grade level and you've been stuck in your second grade reading level, by the time you reach the sixth grade, you're like 8 years behind or something like that, because it compounds, right? Once you get to the fifth grade reading level, if that takes a year to get to, but you're already 2 years behind, you're now 3 years behind going to the next year. You see what I'm saying? It's things like that. And I know numerically it doesn't sound like it makes a lot of sense. It's because of the way that literacy is a habit-based, structural, critical reasoning skill, not an innate skill like being able to speak. Because of the reading, writing, arithmetic situation type deal that was like kind of the basis of education in like the 70s, there's this concept that like your ability to speak is contingent on your ability to read or vice versa. That's not true. There are people who are very effective speakers that have poor literacy, and there are people with very high literacy levels that are not effective speakers. Now, there are some things such as naming speed that are going to kind of be bringing the two together. Naming speed is things like, what's this? Claw clip. What's this? Mouse. Nail polish. Lip mask. Like your ability to quickly name things. That is, for example, an indicator on your ability to read. Did you know that? I didn't know that I did a whole degree in English. I didn't know that. I didn't know that the ability to be like, phone was correlated to like the ability to read. And this is done in many, many evidence-based practices on universal differentiation of learning and RTI-based differentiation practices. Okay. This is backed up by science. So please don't come for me. Teachers are also taught to screen for cognitive learning and other disabilities. And I hate to say this, and God, I don't dislike parents, okay? Some parents get too caught up in their own personal interests and think that their kids doesn't stink, right? And in that, they don't recognize things that are happening, the downsides of their kids. So let's say, for example, your kid has autistic spectrum disorder, and at 5 years old, you're like, well, they're really smart, but they don't talk at all, but they can like do math really well. Sure, but you can then have gaps in the language processing ability that compound over time because you're not getting special differentiated education to fill those gaps for that child to be successful in the future. Right? That is a very meaningful and base example. Again, if I wanted to get into these things in the level that I think they actually deserve, it gets really complicated really, really fast, okay? I know of examples in my real life where people homeschool their kids. My dearest friend in high school was homeschooled for a couple of years, and I knew other people in the co-op that she was in, where there are, when I look back retroactively, are clear indicators of things like SLD, specific learning disability, which is formerly referred to as dyslexia. Because the reason why they don't do that is because it's a spectrum and it's not just related to reading, yada, yada, whatever. Anyway, there are so many parents that, or if a parent has undiagnosed ASD, for example, and goes, my kid's just like me, what's the problem? They won't really refuse to see it. And I'm sorry, if you're a parent and you can't accept that as a reality, there needs to be some reflection. And before you tell me, oh, well, you don't have any kids, blah, 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 you don't know. I understand that. But when you've been trained with the eye to pick up these things, this is something that you are actually able to recognize. In the same way as you having a body doesn't mean you can recognize a condition the way that a doctor can. I think of it more that way, and then maybe it makes a bit more sense. It seems a little bit less insensitive. Because I'm not trying to be insensitive, okay? Now, when we link the way that homeschooling ties in directly to kind of religious fundamentalism, I want to read a little paragraph from this paper that I'll also tag in the description. Nevertheless, religious conservatives likely remain the largest subset of homeschoolers, at least in the United States. The relative freedom and flexibility of homeschooling allows parents to craft an educational environment that reflects their values and priorities, and religious conservatives find such an option particularly appealing. This essay explores the relationship between homeschooling and religious fundamentalism and suggests 4 ways in which homeschooling provides an educational setting, especially conducted to reinforcing fundamentalist principles. And then you skip down a little bit because I can. Intersections of homeschooling and fundamentalism. Quantitative research for homeschooling offers a patchwork of estimates and small-scale studies. In the United States, data collection is limited by widely varying the state regulations. Nearly a quarter of the states don't even know how many homeschoolers there are within the borders. Because of these uncertainties in the total numbers, details such as demographic subsects, including religion, are largely guesswork. In 2007, NCAS survey respondents who homeschool their children were asked about their reasons for doing so. 83% pointed to religion or moral instruction. Certainly not all these respondents were Christians, much less fundamentalists in orientation, but it helps lend credence to the general accepted notion of conservative Christians that they comprise a large subset of homeschoolers in the United States. Resistance to contemporary culture. Religious fundamentalists, Marty and Appleby, no longer perceive themselves as reeling under the corrosive effects of secular life. On the contrary, they perceive themselves as fighting back and doing so rather successfully. Homeschooling their children is a potent way that fundamentalists can resist secular culture. The philosophy and pedagogical flexibility of homeschooling provides the opportunity to instill values and beliefs while reducing the power and presence of the broader culture around them. In his study of American evangelical culture, sociologist Christian Smith suggests that rather than being weakened by modern pluralist society, religious conservatives actually gain strength through their ongoing conflicts with a wide diversity of ethical values. Homeschooling not only provides a private realm for parents to instill their vision of a good life, but the very act of homeschooling serves as an assertion of the conservative religious identity. Now, at the beginning of this video, I actually said that I was going to include stuff about Peter Mon and Audra's streams. I'm actually going to not do that just because I've been recording for too long. I am going to leave those videos in the description. I promise they're so good. I promise you. Peter Mon's video focuses on Kristi's defense of James Charles despite these anti-LGBTQIA plus thought processes that she has and beliefs that she's been truly hiding, and how hypocritical it is to defend the platform of somebody who fuels the stereotypes such as gay men being predators. Audra's stream focuses on being a little bit more kind to the people who fall into kind of alt-right pipelines and the necessity to kind of accept people with an open hand and think about the ways that they construct knowledge. Now, I was nasty and mean, and that's because Kristi has a platform, so I think this is big cringe. And I think that defending and being snaky, because she's high, this is also private, right? So she knows that this is an unsavory way to act and won't own it. And that seems more, that's just dishonest. It's kind of lying by omission in a way. And Audra's nice about it. Love Audra for that, but I can't do it. Sorry. Anyway, links, source, and ways to support the channel all down below, including, YouTube, Patreon, YouTube memberships, all that kind of stuff. Thank you to my patrons again and my YouTube members. Love y'all big time. I'm going to put a silly little TikTok because I've done pissed myself off big time. And I hope you guys have an amazing day. And I hope that you learned a little bit about school maybe today from somebody who knows stuff on this particular topic. The combination of commentary, makeup, and education was a crazy one for me. Anyway, I hope you all have an amazing day, and I'll see you when I see you. Bye.
We got the men, we got the women, and we got non-binary.